Welcome to the Logistics of Logistics, a podcast dedicated to exploring how things get places and the people who get them there. We'll talk with logistics and supply chain leaders about innovation, industry trends, and the future of the logistics business. Now, here's your host, Joe Lynch.
Hello, friends. Welcome to the Logistics of Logistics podcast. My name is Joe Lynch. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's topic is redefining freight brokerage with my friend Nick Jensen. How's it going, Nick?
Doing well, Joe. Thanks for having me on. Excited for our conversation today.
Nick, please introduce yourself and your company and where you're calling from today.
Yeah, so I'm Nick Jensen, Director of National Accounts at Loadsmart, and I'm calling in from New York, New York.
Please introduce Loadsmart. What does Loadsmart do?
Yeah, absolutely. So Loadsmart is a tech freight company that focuses on bringing tech solutions to shippers and carriers to optimize logistics execution.
Right, and you're a digital freight broker, and the reason I say, I think when we hear about freight brokerage, people are all using digital stuff, digital tools. But I differentiate companies like Loadsmart who are kind of tech first. That's not to say you don't have the ability to be, old school freight brokers, but you use technology to do that, and it is again a tech first focus, right?
Tech focused company, absolutely. You nailed it. The majority of our employees, like 40%, sit on that data scientist, engineer, product management side, and the rest kind of filter into marketing, operations, and sales. But it's a big difference from what you see with the traditional freight brokers out there, where it's majority operations and sales. So we definitely have
So would you say 40%? Can you say how many employees you guys have now?
It's over 700 employees.
Because you call them data scientists. They used to just be IT guys, but now they're data scientists.
Data scientists, engineers, product. Yeah, we group them all. We group them all together. Yeah, IT folks. It's a no-no these days to say that.
I know. I'm sure they could do that. They're probably saying that's an insult, but tech focus. So anyway, Nick, who's the sweet spot for Loadsmart?
Yeah, really, all shippers and carriers. My role, I'm focusing more on the shipper side, but when we look at our customers, it's both on the shipper side and the carrier side. And we really, we facilitate to all sizes, small, medium size shippers and carriers, all the way up to large enterprise, ultra large enterprises on both sides.
Excellent. So before we get into the topic today, which is redefining freight brokerage, and we'll talk about what that means, tell us a little bit about you. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? Give us some career highlights before you joined the mighty Loadsmart.
Yeah, absolutely. So grew up in a town just north of Nashville, about 30 minutes, and spent the majority of my life in Tennessee. Went to the University of Tennessee, spent 4 years in Knoxville.
Nice.
Yeah, it was a great time. Unfortunately, the football team was not very good during that time, but we're kind of on the upswing. So
they're like one of those original blue bloods in my mind.
They are hanging on to the late '90s, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, I'm a Michigan Wolverine, so like I always had I joke about it. I hated Peyton Manning because he competed with
Charles Woodson for the Heisman.
Charles Woodson for the Heisman, and I remember I watched him on TV. I was like, he's such a good guy, and I told a good friend of mine who's a volunteer that I've forgiven Peyton Manning. I think he's a great guy, and I remember he's like, oh really already, Joe? It's only been 15 years. But yeah, they're a blue blood. I think college football is a better place when the blue bloods do well. Of course, my team's a blue blood too.
Yeah, exactly, absolutely, yeah, and Peyton's still he's still a god and a hero in Knoxville, so yeah,
should be.
Yeah, so from there, graduated and jumped right into the logistics space. Started working for C.H. Robinson down in Atlanta, and was there for 3 years. Spent all 3 years on the carrier sales side. So first week was dropped right in there during produce season. trying to find coverage from loads going from Cartersville, Georgia, out to Mississippi, Louisiana, some heavy beer runs, and cut my teeth in the industry doing that, really building out the carrier network.
If I know some people listen to this podcast to really learn this business, and I'll say this: when I first started in this business, they didn't call it carrier sales; they would call it the carrier network. And I think people like you always say carrier sales. That's where you started your career. I think it's interesting because companies like Loadsmart, I'm sure others, say we have two customers. We have the shippers who want us to connect them with great carriers and manage their freight. And then you have the other side of your customers, which is the carriers who say, hey, we're going to work with you only if you go get us great freight and great shippers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was the name of the game. I mean, when I came in, it was really building out those relationships with the carriers and showing them that, you were just invested in them as they were invested in you to moving the freight. So, so over the course of the 3 years, moved through some different positions, all in the carrier sales realm. But yeah, it really taught me a lot about building relationships, going out and building them from scratch. And really building the trust with the individuals. A lot of that carries over to the customer-facing side, which I'm focused on more today.
So where after Robinson, where'd you go?
Went to Loadsmart. So yeah, I got the opportunity. Actually, a recruiter reached out to me, and they, how they pitched it. They're like, "Yeah, do you want to join this this new age freight brokerage that's automating the way we're pricing? They have instant pricing, and they're really excited group of guys and girls that want to redefine how brokers work in the industry." And it was a long shot, but I went in for the first interview, and it was like 6:30 p.m. because that was the only time I could get in there. And at the time, 12, 15 employees, but all of them were still there. The buzz in the office was just electrifying. And like I sat down, and next thing you know, it was like a 2-hour interview, but it didn't even feel like it because I was whiteboarding with the person at the time, and they were just a hungry group trying to figure out the space. Because, as you may know, a lot of them, that initial group, didn't come from the freight industry. A lot of them were on the tech side, or engineer side, or on the or a lawyer, one of our co-founders, right?
That's right. Now, who are the co-founders of Votesmart?
Yeah, so it's Felipe Capella and Ricardo.
Yeah, and what's interesting, I when you talk to tech guys, I did talk to Felipe. Those guys who came to this, a lot of the tech guys came to this business saying this is an $800 billion industry that is underserved by technology. Now, we all in our daily life, we have problems that we're solving for customers. That perspective, that I'll call it the entrepreneur's perspective, is that total addressable market mentality. And it's real easy to go, wrong way to say it, completely wrong to say it. It's easier to go to see venture capitalists when you can have a story that starts with $800 billion spend, very fragmented, some using tech, some not using tech. That's the space we want to jump into and grow and hopefully dominate at some point. And I think you guys are well on your way to doing that. But that again, I've heard multiple tech people who come from the tech side. I say, why'd you get into this? And they say, size of the market, lack of technology. What other place do we see that big a market with so little tech?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and one of that, that was one of the reasons I came over. At the time we were offering instant pricing, but you had to come to loadsmart.com, put in your OD pairs, and we would give you an instant rate right then and there. So the technology was.
You mentioned OD pairs. We'll describe what that is.
Yeah, it's just origin destination, right? So you would go to loadsmart.com and plug in Atlanta to Chicago, and we would give you instant rate.
You've got to put the zip and the address and all that, and that's when so you hear somebody say OD pairs, that's the origin and destination pairs.
Yes, for sure. And we've evolved so much since then, but But even just coming in and that being like the sole thing that we were going out and selling, it was exciting because a lot of customers at the time had not seen anything like that. And then, as we started to go after larger and larger shippers, we realized that we had to figure out a way to get that instant pricing into their world, and automate that as much as possible. Instead of them coming to loadsmart.com, planners were going to do that.
Yeah, things have changed very rapidly in the last 5-7 years. So anyway, today's topic is redefining freight brokerage. And let's talk about first, before we talk about redefining, let's talk about the traditional freight broker. And they're still out there. And you worked at C.H. Robinson. I know they're they're growing their tech. But talk about the original, like the original freight brokers who don't have C.H. Robinson cash or a tech focus. Tell me how they're doing business today, and what you would perceive as some of the challenges with what they're doing.
Yeah, and I think that when we talk about traditional, you think old school, like picking up the phone to do a lot of things, emailing to do a lot of the day-to-day tasks, building an army of reps to do simple tasks. That was definitely the world that I lived in when I first started in the industry, and I think there are a lot of brokers out there that still operate in that world. Although I think some of them are slowly moving into more of this digital, cloud-based, and automated world. But yeah, I think the biggest difference that you see between the traditional and the digital players, which there's a few of us out there now, is just the desire and curiosity to automate as much as possible, right? And that is I think that's the biggest driving difference. And we'll talk about some other things too that are kind of separating. But I think the industry is ripe for automation internally, as far as just your processes, but also customer facing, carrier facing, automating those as much as possible.
Right. And if I could elaborate on that, I think a lot of freight brokers, and maybe some to even still today, probably a lot are still doing the cradle to grave model, which is I, as the broker, I send emails, I make cold calls, I look for my own customers, and then as soon as I win that customer, I'm managing that customer from cradle, from the time I met them till they hopefully to the cradle to grave, hopefully not death, but that model has its limitations. The one limitation is I'm, as the broker, I can only do so many, right? And I know if you get really good, they give you an assistant and another assistant. And you find some freight brokers who say, yeah, I got 10 guys working for me. I'm the main guy. But they build their own little fiefdom within the company, which is fine. That model has worked. The problem is if that guy says, hey, Nick, I quit. And you go, oh, no, you can't quit. Well, then I'm going to need a bigger bite. I need more money. And I always say, when I get a lot of phone calls where people say things like, hey, I want somebody with a book of business. Could you connect me with someone? I go, it just doesn't work that way. You just can't call somebody and say, hey, how many clients do you have, and can you bring them all over here? I mean, it just doesn't work. But more and more companies are saying, I don't want to do that. I want to have some SDRs, sales development reps. I want them to make appointments for my sales team and my account managers. And I have a marketing team. And then I have an operations team, a customer success team, an onboarding team. With you guys, a lot of tech guys. So the customer isn't connected just to one guy who might leave. Right?
Absolutely not. Yeah. What you kind of described there is almost like a little factory when it comes to onboarding a customer, right? It has to pass through a few milestones, right? And then it starts to live and grow within certain departments.
You have processes, and you have processes that are well known, and everybody is focused on their area, and you get better and better and better, and you create more and more tech around it. And as opposed to that one guy who got really good at making cold calls, who now is in charge of a lot of shipments. And by the way, when you're not using technology, you might be limited to how many loads you can actually manage. So I don't know what the number is, but for every additional load, you got to bring on a guy, right? And that's not the way tech is. If you say, we got the technology really humming here, this guy's doing 20, 40, 80, hundreds of shipments a day, and it's just one guy, because all he's dealing with, or one gal, dealing with exceptions, dealing with something higher level. So I think that's the contrast I see. That's the older school model, but it's still out there. I mean, it's not like it's gone.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, the team that I manage, the account management team, one of the KPIs that we look at is loads per head per day, like you just mentioned, right? And seeing, what is that ceiling, right? And as we introduce more tech and automate more processes, we see that number just increasing, every single quarter, every year. And still at the point of not jeopardizing service and communication to our customers.
You got the tech doing the tech work and people doing people work. So if I call you and say, hey, I want to talk about my account, I don't have to talk to a robot. I get to talk to a person.
Yeah, no robots, not yet, anyways.
Anyway, Nick, when we were talking about this before we hit record, we talked about 6 areas that you said this is what redefines. This is the difference between the traditional freight broker and a digital first freight broker like you guys. So what is that first thing that is redefining freight brokerage?
Yeah, touched on it a little bit already, but it's the automation, right? Automation to drive efficiency. With tech out there, it's really just focusing in on where we can automate as much as possible to give the customers the benefit of the automation, right? So you want to create processes that are systematic and can run 24/7, and there's very little interruption in those type of automations.
So you mentioned that you're using automation for different things, and you mentioned you guys have a measure. I don't know if you can share it, but that you're able to do more and more shipments with the same guy. So how many loads per day can a guy using a Loadsmart guy manage in a day?
Well, if we look at the quote and book piece of that, because that is historically used to be a very manual process. You think about if someone wanted to do just one single quote by themselves, right? It may take 2 minutes, and that's probably being pretty conservative there. And you do that 500 times a day. If you're a good sized broker and you're quoting 500 loads per day, it's 1,000 minutes just on quoting, and then you break that down in hours. It's like 16 hours. So you need 2 heads, right, full time in a day just to quote 500 loads, right? You build an API dynamic pricing around that automated pricing, and you can do 500 loads in seconds, right? So you are completely eliminating that manual process, and at the same time too, you're also able to store all that data too. Like if you're manually quoting, that's very tough to store all that information, especially if you're doing it spreadsheets or you're using 4 different things to get your rate, right? The last thing you want to do is then data entry that rate into something else for you to go back in and analyze.
More effective too. You're getting the right price. Yeah, I've used this term once or twice in my podcast. I say the human API. Where we have put humans into the role of an API. It's like, well, we don't have API for this yet, so I got Nick and Joe being human API. I take information from different sources and I bring it in. Right? Yes.
But yeah, the quoting and booking piece, like that's just one piece of the puzzle that we're looking to automate. Scheduling, pickup and delivery locations is another thing, right? Warehouse management, that's something that I feel like we're just scratching the surface on, and as we get more and more into it, it's exciting. And I think if we can start to offer more real-time appointment scheduling and moving appointments around based on driver's location, which we have more and more visibility into that's just going to make everybody's life easier, right? It's going to make the warehouse supervisor, and they won't be pulling their hair out saying, where's the truck? Like they're going to know, and they're going to shift that appointment to the necessary time slot and move some other folks around. And all that's done programmatically.
Yep. So the first one is automation to drive efficiency. And you should have a guy inside of Loadsmart using your tech should be able to manage significantly more loads, but not only manage them, but do a better job, because using technology means there's not a whole bunch of human error in it. And when I say human error, there's judgment, I should say. I don't want to have to make Nick's deciding this margin, Joe's deciding this margin. That's a lack of consistency. You guys have, well, which brings us to the next point. So talk about the next point that is makes you guys different. Yep. What is dynamic pricing?
Yeah, so dynamic pricing, really, it's taking machine learning and using an algorithm to come up with rates and provide that back to the customer. So it's happening in real time. It's taking in a lot of different market conditions, internal data points. I can't remember how many data points go into it these days, but it used to be like 40 something plus. I'm sure it's simplified a little bit more, but that's what we mean by dynamic, right? It's what the price we have today, actually this hour, is going to change in 2 hours, right? And it's all, that really what's changing is like looking at, market trends, and also lead time's a big one going into that. So that's what we mean by dynamic.
So that's what the airlines have always used. It's really I'm trying to understand the market, what the shipper will pay, and say, hey, we can tell you that this is a 90% chance that they're going to say yes. So you're giving them a price that's attractive enough for them to immediately go yes. So it kind of gets them to that buy now, where it's like in the past we had you would say, hey, Joe, I can do that load for you for $2,800, and I'd say, oh, Nick, you got to do better. Somebody just said $2,750, and then you call back to your carrier and go, I hate to do this to you. Can I knock $50 off of your rate? And they go, no, you can knock $25 off. And then you're like, not making enough. You start calling other carriers, right? And then you call me back, and I don't answer, and then you call me back again, right?
Yeah.
So that is the old way without dynamic pricing, where I think now you're able to say, I'm going to give Joe a price right away that he's going to say yes. And I probably an AI can say, I know Joe's account well enough that this is a 95% chance of him saying yes.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also looking at, our confidence level of moving that load. There may be situations where the customer just buys very well in that lane, and we, at Loadsmart, we just haven't gotten to that rate yet. So like we put our rates where we're confident that we're going to move it with based on our carrier network. That may mean we're very strong in some lanes and not so strong in other lanes, right? Because again, it's taking all the information that we've aggregated, external and internal being the most important, right? Looking at historically what we've been able to do on those lanes, and give the customer that confident rate.
Right. And I think there's another piece to this, which is I've taken out the individual judgments, right? So if I have Nick and Joe sitting next to each other, Nick's being very aggressive, lowering the margin and potentially putting us at risk of losing money. And Joe's, on the other hand, is being really greedy and is knocking our carrier price down lower and lower, and raising the price, and we're losing business, and we're upsetting customers, and at the same time upsetting our carrier partners. You guys go, no. We're going to put the dynamic price in there. We're going to understand the market really well. We're not going to have this strong arm or, again, the behaviors that you might not want to see.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Early on during our API dynamic rate conversations with some larger shippers, one of them made a comment that stood out, and it's stuck with me, to this day. They said that they would rather have a machine price their freight during a tight market than a human, right? Because a human's like, I'm going to add an extra $100 or $200 or $300 onto that, where a machine is just like, it's taking all the inputs and just spitting out a price. There's no emotion involved in it, right?
When the pandemic hit, I had somebody call me up, large shipper, and they said, should we go back and renegotiate our price with our carriers. And I was like, I wouldn't. I was like, and by the way, this is a great company where they really kind of pride themselves on this long-term partnership. It's not so that was why they were asking. And I said, I just think that during a pandemic where you're trying to take advantage, but getting back to it, that dynamic pricing, they adjusted day one on what the pandemic prices were, then in day two. And it's not waiting. Me, you, we have all these biases in our head. We say, I think the market's falling apart. I think I'm going to be able to lower the price on everything. I'm bringing my biases. We get tribal knowledge. I'm putting air quotes here. Tribal knowledge. It's great, but better if you can take that tribal knowledge and put it into a system and have it be real knowledge.
Yeah, and the whole dynamic pricing it's gaining a lot of momentum. Dynamic pricing and dynamic routing guide. I was just at the E2 Open Supply Chain Conference. I think that's the full title earlier this month. And API pricing was a big part of that. There were a couple sessions dedicated just to dynamic pricing. One specifically to dynamic routing guide, which that's a little bit different depending on how we want to insert our rates into the TMS. But it's gaining a lot of momentum, and shippers and TMSs are interested in including this, right, and part of the bundle and getting that. And we're seeing, we're one of the first to market with dynamic rates, API pricing into TMSs. And now when we talk to our shippers, we're seeing 7, 8, 9, 10 different API dynamic pricing providers in their network these days.
Right. So if I was to work with Loadsmart, you guys have your own technology, obviously, transportation management system. Are people using your transformation management system, or are they using their own, like some of the large shippers, and then connecting to Loadsmart?
Usually the latter. Especially with our larger shippers, they're already in bed with a lot of these large TMSs, and we're connected to every single one of them. So getting that connection set up, some of them take longer than others, but there's a couple of TMSs out there where it's 7 clicks and bam, you have dynamic pricing inside your routing guide or your spot portal.
Yep. So I just talked to Dawn Salvucci-Favier from Green Screens, and she said there's like 17,000 freight brokers, and she said, maybe 100 are using dynamic pricing. And she said even that is to a different levels, right? Somewhere. So that's always the nature of this business is, oh yeah, we use dynamic pricing. There's a spectrum. There's the people who are ones on that spectrum, and then there's the tens, right? So
yeah, there's people that are using other people's technology when it comes to the pricing, and the people that have built it, themselves, and it
right. So you built it in. It's built in on your tool, and
absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And we've got all different levers and knobs to turn to really make sure that we're in tune with the shippers network, and also the entire network.
So dynamic pricing is we're calling it a separate topic here, separate task or bullet point, but it really is about this automation. It's about getting faster, better, cheaper. And I've said this before on my podcast when it comes to dynamic pricing. Over the last few years, we hear visibility. Still super important. We still don't have enough visibility in the business, but I think it's moving towards dynamic pricing as one of those killer apps. And I would say that this is one of those places where it's the haves and have-nots. People using dynamic pricing, plain and simple, are going to be more successful. They're taking out time. They're taking out errors. They're just going to be more profitable. Things are just easier in those businesses.
Yeah, and like I mentioned earlier, you're eliminating that manual task, and you can quote thousands and thousands of loads per day, and with a very precise level of accuracy. We started off on the full truckload side, dry van and reefer. We have it with flatbed, we have it with intermodal, LTL, and partial, and yeah. We're exactly. So full truckload was the beginning of dynamic pricing. We're expanding it to all modes and making sure we can tie in all those dynamic rates into every single TMS out there to give the shippers that optionality.
And let me guess, if I was to quote something, you could also quote it, all those modes at the same time. So you might say,
Give you different transit times.
So I might have that down as a full truckload, and you go, Joe, I can do that on a volume move on an LTL.
Yep, exactly. Or put it on rail, extend the transit time, but could save you, $500.
That is so cool. And by the way, I always say that being able to suggest the right mode, people have always done that. When I was at a 3PL, we did that, but we did it kind of after the fact. I was like, I noticed you did like 3 LTLs last week. Next week, if you want to do those same 3 LTLs, let's put them on a full truck. That's great advice 2 weeks late.
Yeah, exactly. Those are long gone, Joe. But also, just one more note on the dynamic pricing. What something else it gives us is just us being able to quote thousands of loads per day. It gives us all that data too, and now we have an insight into the customer's network, how it's operating, and we can start to have some additional conversations besides just like, hey, I can move that Atlanta to Chicago run for you, right? You can start to pinpoint trends and show that to them.
Which brings us to our next bullet point. What's the next thing that's redefining freight brokerage, Nick?
Yeah, so it's taken that dynamic pricing and dynamic routing guide to the next level. So Rate Guard is a solution that we've implemented with a few shippers lately. And the reason this came about was dynamic pricing is fantastic for shippers, right? If you're a load planner, you have 10 API providers. They're quoting a lot of freight for you. You're getting a very good read into what the market is. Your providers aren't missing out on quotes. But it also it makes your life a lot easier because then you can set up rules to start taking rates, the lowest cost provider or service, whatever it may be. But there's also the downside where you can be a little too hands off and you're not monitoring the cost, and you're just taking advantage of the automation of the dynamic rates. So where Rate Guard comes into play is it puts a ceiling on these rates based on industry benchmarks or internal benchmarks for the customer. So you can say, hey, here's our benchmark rate for this lane or our entire network. And if you exceed that, then don't return us a quote. We don't even want to see it. But if you're under it, we definitely want to see it. We're interested. And then that is one way to build that trust with shippers, to let them know that, hey, we're only going to quote if we fall below your certain threshold.
So that might be, I bring you on. I'm working with Loadsmart, and I'm still worried about dynamic pricing. It sounds so scary because it's still new, right? And so I know I've been paying somewhere between $3,800 and $4,200 for that lane. So I might say I never want to pay more than $4,200. So that scares me to death. Even if the market changed and $4,500 is the new price, I want to at least have a discussion. So this kind of puts some guardrails around dynamic pricing. And by the way, I think there's a lot of this going on in humankind right now. Is we're starting to trust technology, but we still want a little bit of control sometimes, and that's a scare. But I tell people this all the time. A few years ago, came back from a lot of traveling, pre-COVID, of course, paid off my credit cards that I'd been traveling on, zeroed it out. Next day, I got like $4,000 more on that credit limit. I was like, I didn't ask for that. So in the olden days, a human would have processed that and said, well, we're looking at Joe's character, his past, blah, blah, blah. And they would say, we're going to go with $250 more. AI looks differently. They don't think like humans. They just think what their algorithm tells them. And they looked and said, this guy is good for it. And they just gave it to me. Humans don't make decisions that big and bold because they have a boss, right? Boss would pull me into the office and go, Joe, who the hell do you think you are giving this guy an extra $4,000? Those decisions, those credit limits are made automatically by the AI. And I can imagine early on the credit card companies were like, whoa, 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 whoa. Who just gave this guy all this credit without any discussion? You should have at least called him and made him verify he's still working or whatever.
For sure.
And so I look at RateGuard as that same thing. It's like, I trust the technology, but it worries me a little.
and you made a good point earlier about, you're used to paying $4,200 max on this lane, but if the market tightens up, then it allows us to go back to the customer and show them the data, saying, hey, I know you used to pay 42 on this, but the market it's moving, right? So you have some cushion to move that up a little bit, and we have that insight, and we have those conversations with customers now. And again, one of the things we're trying to solve for RateGuard is preventing the load from eventually moving into the spot market. So RateGuard kind of lives in that in the routing guide. So let's say the primary rejects the load, and then we insert our dynamic rate into that routing guide, and we try to be within the guardrails that we've agreed upon with the customer.
By the way, we did things like this in the past, but we did it manually. And and right now to put that into your algorithm is easy. You're like, yeah, we moved that up now. We moved it to $4,500. They're comfortable. They recognize we got COVID pricing. Good, right? In the past, they said, Rick, you can move that lane every week, or Nick, as soon as you move it, as soon as the price goes to this, we got to have another discussion.
Yeah, and something else too that comes about with RateGuard is we have the data insights as far as which loads we're quoting, which means we can see which loads are being rejected by the primary. And then if we're not tendered that load in the dynamic routing guide and it moves to spot, a lot of times we're still quoting that on the spot market, but then we can compare with the customer what they eventually paid in the spot market versus what our rate was in the dynamic routing guide, and were they better off letting the load filter on the spot, or should they have letting it been tendered in the dynamic routing guide? And we tend to push getting the rates tendered in the dynamic routing guide, saves the planner's time, doesn't go to spot market, and you can be done with it and move on.
Excellent. So Nick, we're talking about redefining the freight brokerage market. Well, it's a freight brokerage. And so we talked about a few things there is doing that. First, the automation. We talked about that. And dynamic pricing, which is really part of automation. And these rate guards are really part of dynamic pricing. These, I think, are just us getting more and more. We're segmenting, but in a lot of ways, it's all the automation. But what's the fourth thing that you see as redefining the freight brokerage business?
Yeah, something that we're excited about, and we've seen a lot of momentum here, is making contracted rates more dynamic. So historically, as you probably know, is the shipper goes out all their providers, and they shoot out thousands of lanes, and people set rates for those for 12 months, and those are static paper rates. And they stay there for 12 months, 24 months, 3
right.
years, whatever the agreement is.
And by the way, for somebody to say, what does Nick mean by paper rates? Explain what you mean by that.
Yeah, so paper rates in the traditional brokerage world, it's you sign that you're going to uphold this rate for 12 months, but if the market tightens up, then there are decisions that are made to say, well, maybe it's not in our best interest to take this load at this time because the market is bearing a higher rate.
So I heard somebody say on my podcast once is paper rates are only good on paper, meaning, and to be fair, if I asked you, let's just say your old job, Nick, give me some rates for the next year on this lane, and it's just before COVID, it's the February before COVID began, and you give me a year's worth of rates, and you say, Joe, I'm good for this. I'm going to prick my finger. I'm going to sign in blood. These rates are good. You're going to be a happy guy. And then rates skyrocket, and you have a choice to make, which is I'm going to lose money hand over fist, or I'm going to call Joe and say, I am so sorry. Rates went through the roof. Can we work together? But what's a weird thing is right now, Nick, we are coming to the end of COVID. Without technology, just you, would you feel comfortable giving me rates for the next year?
It's we are. We're becoming a lot more confident.
I mean, you are.
That
take away your tech, just you.
Yes.
You would know
no,
it.
there's with what's happened over the past two and a half years. Yeah, there's definitely some hesitancy to put out 12-month rates.
And that's the weird thing about it. We have as a carrier, you're in that trick bag of, do I give really aggressive, be aggressively low on what I make so I can win the business, or do I go a little high and then even if rates go higher, I'm protected.
If you go high, then you run the risk of not even getting the business, right? And we've seen kind of the shift of shippers too, moving from those annual bids to smaller bids, monthly, quarterly, weekly.
And that's another thing. The RFP process is a pain in the ass unless you got cool tech. So basically, your reliable contracts is the antidote to paper rates.
Yeah, exactly. So what we're solving for here is we're going to our rates are going to fluctuate with the market. We're going to set there's two rates that we're going to set with the customer. There's going to be the target rate, and then there's going to be the ceiling rates. And then we're our goal is to stay below the ceiling rate. So in a scenario where target rate's $1,000 and we source the carrier at $1,200. And the ceiling is, let's say, 14. We're in between the target and the ceiling rate, and we make 4% on like the management fee or whatever it may be. The cool thing about reliable contracts is if we start to source below that target rate, let's say the market starts to soften a little bit, then the customer is going to benefit because now that rate, we'll pass that new rate on to the customer. And they can kind of take advantage of that softening market.
This is, again, Loadsmart trying to prevent people from being pushed out into the spot market.
Exactly. So in tight markets, we want to prevent, PTA, the primary tender acceptance, from reducing. We want to keep that as high as possible. So reliable contracts, the thing that we are selling is 100% tender acceptance with this, with the understanding that the rate is going to fluctuate. And at the same time, we have built-in mechanisms to incentivize Loadsmart to buy as low as possible.
Are also aligned. So if it goes above target, you make a little less. So you're completely aligned to shipper interest. And again, I'm not criticizing anybody's business model. The freight brokerage model's worked for us very well for a long time. But we've all heard stories and probably even seen it where the broker and the shipper are somewhat disconnected because I'm looking for the lowest priced carrier and I want to put a big margin on it and I want to go and bang the gong and say I made $1,000 on that load. That's it, we were joking about it before we hit record, you and Bio. How would you like it if you were a shipper and you're walking through a freight brokerage bullpen and they're banging a gong and say, "Oh, I made $1,000 on that load"? You'd be like, "What? Let me get out of here! Like, what kind of madhouse am I signing up for?" So I love the alignment. And again, paper rates are horrible for our business. It's a stupid idea. So I like what you guys are doing there.
Yeah, and like you said, one of the benefits of this is the full rate transparency. The customer will always see what we're paying. And some may look at this and say, well, that's just a cost plus model, and that's been around for years. That's nothing new. What do you guys? It's a little different, right? Because cost plus is usually here's the cost, customer, and then here's our fixed fee that goes on top of that, right? And there's no incentive to keep that as low as possible.
You've aligned yourself to the shipper's interest, so you're not acting like you're their friend and then screwing them on a price. You're saying, hey, look, when you hurt, I hurt.
Yeah, exactly, for sure. And there's multiple different models that we draw up of this, but usually, we set that target and we set the ceiling. If we ever go above the ceiling, then it's just a pass-through cost to the customer. We don't make any money on the load, so that is a lot of incentive to make sure we're staying below that ceiling.
I gotta talk to the boss about that one. So I better the boss is gonna stop by and see me if I can do that.
Yeah, for sure.
So what's the next one? What's number 5?
So number 5 is when we look at freight brokers now, digital brokers, it's more than just moving freight, right? Customers want us to be more of a consultant with their business. And I know it's a very broad term and it gets thrown out a lot, but it's true. Like they look at, especially the brokers that are positioning themselves more on the tech side, like, hey, you have access to all this data. What can you tell us about what's going on with other shippers in our vertical, or within our network as well? And then on top of that, providing more than just the service, right? So offering some standalone solutions that we can package with the services that we're offering with the customer and help them really optimize their entire network.
Right. I like that, because if you guys are able to manage many more loads with one guy, right? So you freed up a lot of people, theoretically, that can focus on the big picture, which is things like, hey, Nick, we could save you a lot more money if you tendered with us, on a Monday rather than on a Tuesday afternoon. We could save you this much per week. And they go, oh, well, yeah, let me look into that. Or, hey, did you know that you're shipping this LTL? We could, if we could delay this, do two LTLs into one truckload, we save you this much money.
For sure, and that's a good point. So that with the automation, you get all this data, right? And then it's up to us to make sure that we can identify trends, repackage that, and then shoot it back to the customer. One quick story on that: we, as you know, shippers are always rating their providers on a weekly, bi-weekly, monthly basis. What's your on-time pick, your on-time delivery, your PTA, all that. So during with this one customer, we were going through our monthly scorecard conversations, and we were having trouble out of a certain lane, and started looking at the numbers, and we look at a lot of different data points, and one that really stuck out to us was the lead time on these tenders, and we just assumed this is a large shipper. They obviously probably had this lead time data, but we presented it back to them, and they were like, whoa, like, we're not even looking at that. And now, how are you guys coming up with that information? And we're like, wow, that's pretty easy. It's you tendered to us on this date, and here's a pickup date. And as just looking at their entire network, as that decreased, we started to see the service drop a little bit, especially when the market was tight. And so we worked with them to incorporate this into their own data, and then internally they started using it as a metric to grade their business and their planners, and even more upstream, making sure they get the orders in enough time, because it's really affecting not only the performance for on-time pick, on-time delivery, but also pricing. Anything with shorter lead time, you're going to pay a lot more money on. So that's just one instance. Obviously, there's a lot of other things, but that is with that automation and that more time to really dive into customers' network, we're presenting information back to them that's helpful.
Right. And again, you're going after the cost of this. So rather than say, traditionally if somebody said, I want my freight broker to save me money, they were lowering their margin or looking for a cheaper carrier. What you guys are saying is, I don't want to ding my carrier. They're my customer too. I want to find ways that we can all make money, but lower the cost, right? And that takes a little bit of planning, a little bit of foresight, and again, the technology enables you to free yourself up. I've said this before. Sometimes people look at headcount in a funny way. They'll say something like, "Well, yeah, we need to reduce headcount." Well, if I'm Votesmart and I go, my headcount is 40% tech guys, those tech guys are reducing the cost of freight every single day they work. And so it's a different model. It's not like they're not just sitting there banging the phone. I mean, by the way, I'm banging the phone, but they are lowering the cost of shipping by automating more functions. That's really a sea change in this business. But we had one last thing, and this is redefining freight brokerage in a big way, and I think this is just more of a Loady thing. That's what you guys.
That's
call
right.
yourselves,
Yeah,
right?
you
Loadies.
hit it right on the head. Loadies.
So what is the last
So
one?
the last one, like I mentioned, it's incorporating these standalone products that go with the logistics services that we're providing to our shippers, but also to our carriers. So One of them is Camion, and this is it's a truck management software that we sell to carriers out there, and it helps dispatchers optimize drivers' time on the road. Right? They can use it as a one-stop shop for their operations. It's a load board. They can facilitate accounting, billing, safety checks, and then also
it's more efficiency
for the carrier, and it allows us for more integration with those carriers. Going into my next point, Loadsmart integrated network. This is something that we just rolled out with one of our shippers, and what this allows us to do, we call it LIN, Loadsmart Integrated Network, is we can connect very easily and instantaneously carriers that are on the Camion platform to shippers that normally wouldn't use, let's say, a smaller carrier because either the carrier doesn't have the resources or the technology to implement EDI. So when you go to a large shipper.
Oh, yeah, because there's a lot of onesie twosie, maybe owner operators who would say, yeah, I can't, I don't want to invest. I don't need the hassle. I'm driving a truck for a reason, so I don't have to deal with techies.
Yeah. But they fit a very specific lane or lanes for that shipper, and they could provide a very reasonable price and service. But the shippers, maybe it's the shipper just saying, I really don't want to allocate our internal resources to onboarding and setting up EDI with all these onesie twosie carriers, right? What Lynn does, it helps automate that, and we can, anyone that's on Camion, they connect to Loadsmart Integrated Network, and then we can connect that to all the different shipper TMSs and give the shippers all this additional availability and capacity, and they still get the EDI benefits of tendering, shipment updates, invoicing, stuff like that.
So there's this. So Camion and then the Loadsmart Integrated Network, or LIN. Those are these other suite of tools.
Yeah, so we also have what we call RFP Guide, which is it's a cloud-based RFP software management system. Basically making it easier for shippers to manage their RFP process. This fits any size shipper from small, medium business all the way up to enterprise.
So can I use it if I'm not a Loadsmart customer? How's that work?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So when you say you're not a Loadsmart customer, if you're not a shipper for Loadsmart, yeah, you can still use RFP Guide. You can use that to manage your contracted business and push out all of these bids. Whether it's like I mentioned earlier, we're seeing it a lot now. A lot of different bids.
And how do you guys make money on that?
It's a service. It's a subscription fee on that.
And again, that also serves the purpose is you guys get more data, more understanding of the market.
Exactly.
And hopefully connect with some people who go, you know what, I like this tool. I like the loadies.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen it both ways where they were an RFP Guide customer first and they jumped over and became we started moving loads for them, or vice versa. We were already moving loads for them and we introduced them to RFP Guide.
I know you guys have one other kind of separate tech, I don't know if you call them divisions or whatever, but I talked to the guys from OpenDoc on the podcast, and that's another part of another suite. So what does OpenDoc do? Yeah, so
OpenDoc is it's a scheduling platform really that helps shippers better manage their dock appointments. It puts everything again out on the cloud and makes it very easy for carriers to set appointments, but also for the warehouse managers and the warehouse workers to manage those appointments to see what's available, not available. Do we need to switch some things around? And it cuts out the phone call, the emails, because I can't tell you how many times we would call facilities and warehouse manager would answer like, yeah, I need an appointment for next Tuesday. He's like, all right, I got you down, 9 a.m. And then you go to show up, and he never inputted it into the system, right? So this allows the carrier to go into into OpenDoc and actually set that appointment so it's confirmed, right? And there's no misinformation, there's no missing, or you didn't carry that information from Notepad to your system. It's happening right then and there in real time, and also it gives the warehouses all the data that they need on the back end to see like which appointments are working, not working, when are they usually late? Why are they late? Stuff like that.
More data.
That's right. It's the name of the game.
Yeah. The promise of the digital supply chain is we'll have visibility, and we've talked about visibility a lot in the last few years. Obviously, very important. But I don't want to just have visibility to the ship is sinking. I want to be able to do something. So we want to collaborate on that digital supply chain, and this open doc gives me that. So like if I'm a carrier and I say I'm running a little late, I'm not going to be there for my 9 o'clock, but I'll be there by 10:30. I can go into that system, make that change, and potentially that maybe the guy who's at the receiver says, okay, yeah, I got that notice. That's fine, not a problem. I'm going to see what else I can do between now 9 and 10:30, as opposed to just showing up late. And then after a while, you start to say, hey, you know what, Nick? I noticed you switched this from 9 to 10:30 10 times in the last year. Do you want to just move it to 10:30?
Exactly. So that is it's definitely a tool that we're excited about, and also just
is that a standalone?
Yeah, it is. It is, and it's one of those things too where it's one of those processes that isn't talked about a lot. It's not sexy. It's scheduling, right? Yeah, but it is the backbone of really making sure loads are set up for success, right? So you got to have good appointments to be able to carry that over to carriers, and also you need that flexibility in appointments.
Yep. So what I'm going to do here is, my loady friend, is I'm going to summarize this, and then I want to get your final thoughts on it. So we talked about redefining freight brokerage. And again, there's traditional freight brokers who are becoming increasingly tech-oriented themselves, but then there's like digital-first freight brokerage like you guys. So the number one thing is this automation that you guys, and driving efficiency. 40% of your employees are techies who are automating this process. And that's going to allow us to be a lot more efficient, move a lot more stuff, lower the cost per load. Then dynamic pricing, we talked about that. Rate guards, which is really kind of an extension of dynamic pricing to make sure that stays within those guardrails. Number 4, we talked about reliable contracts. Is really the antidote to paper rates and aligning the broker to the shipper and keeping people out of the spot market. Number 5, we talked about just the changing role of the freight broker. As more and more stuff is automated, as more and more stuff is managed by technology, we have the opportunity to have data insights and make suggestions that take the cost out in a better way. Not in a way like I beat up my carrier to take money out, in a way where you say, I reduced my margin now, I hate these guys. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
This is going after the costs, which is what ops guys are supposed to do. And then last but not least, you guys have this full suite of tools for shippers and carriers. We talked about Camion, LIN, or the Loadsmart integrated network, the RFP guide, which is cloud-based, right?
Yes, exactly.
And last but not least, we talked about OpenDoc. So, final thoughts.
Yeah, final thoughts. You summarized that well. The lifeblood of Loadsmart, when we look at our core principles, one of them is curiosity, and I think that's what really got us in the door with a lot of these shippers and carriers in the first place, and it helped us to figure out where we need to automate as much as possible. As we started automating, we started to discover other areas where we could become more efficient. Dynamic routing, dynamic pricing and routing guides, rate guards, reliable contracts, and then also looking at the full suite of products that we can offer our customers, both on the shipper side and on the carrier side, to be that full partner and consultant, and really bringing it all together. And we've been able to do this in a very short amount of time. We've been around for 6-7 years, and the first couple of years was just figuring out, what are we good at, right? We think, we have a lot of good stuff out there in our heads, but this is just the beginning. And I think, next year, 2 years, 3 years down the road, it's going to even look more and more impressive as far as automation. More and more shippers and carriers are going to adopt it, It's one of those things like you gotta be on this ride right now, or you will, like you said, you will get left behind.
Oh yeah, and I don't say this in any negative sense. It's just the techies are like 11-0. They're like Alabama or Georgia this year. I mean, they are just plowing through. They don't come to an industry and then go, yeah, we tried it. It was hard and we left.
Right.
So they're transforming this space and for the better. And again, I think there's a lot of freight brokers who are owned by guys who are my age who grew up in that business, not in tech. And they're making this awkward adjustment or awkward move, but it's not going to be easy for everybody to make the move to tech.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So, Nick, before you go, tell us what conferences you guys going to? Where will we see all you loadies if we go to conferences?
Yeah, it's exciting. We've already been to a lot this year. We've got a full agenda.
Now, did you go to Manifest?
Yeah, we were at Manifest.
I'm going next year. I did not know about it. People were talking about it on my podcast, and I was like, I don't even know what that is, but I will be there next year.
I did not go, but I talked to some folks that did, and they had a good time. It was very good. But like I mentioned, I was at E2 Open. That was a very good one. We're going to be at TIA in San Diego later, I guess, in next week. The Freightways Future Supply Chain in Rogers, Arkansas in May.
That's in Northwest Arkansas. I just did a podcast with a professor from there yesterday.
Okay. Yeah, I visited Northwest Arkansas, last year, and it's a beautiful place. Most people don't realize it, but it's a good place to visit.
Yeah, it's one of the cool things about what's going on there is the big four are J.B. Hunt, obviously Walmart, ArcBest is there, and then Tyson, and they've really developed a supply chain hub there. I mean, and it's something so funny if you're my age and you go, Arkansas, what the hell is in Arkansas? There's that farms or whatever. And now it's like, yeah, it's a supply chain hub. And by the way, University of Arkansas, number one among supply chain schools on Gartner's list. Now, there's a lot of other people.
I didn't know that.
A lot of other people would say, "Whoa, what about Michigan State or MIT?" Lots of good supply chain schools and a lot of lists. That's the name of the game. More lists, more number ones.
Yeah, all the folks from Tennessee, when you went to Arkansas, it was usually to go duck hunting, right? They had very good duck hunting west of the Mississippi. And then the last one we'll be at is Gartner Supply Chain in Orlando in June. But there's several more, but those three are going to be the top ones that we're focused on for this quarter.
Okay. So, Nick, how do we reach out and talk to you guys over at Loadsmart?
Yeah, so you can go to loadsmart.com, and we have all the information there on our website. There's boxes, whether you're a shipper, carrier, or warehouse. Click on that, learn more. You reach out to me specifically on LinkedIn or nick@loadsmart.com.
What I'm going to do, Nick, is I'll put all the links you just described. I'll put your LinkedIn profile, I'll put your company website. Anything else Bio gives me, I will put into the show notes so people can click through and talk to you guys.
Love it.
Nick, thank you so much for taking the time.
Joe, it was a pleasure and happy to be on.
Yep. And thank all of you for listening to my podcast. Your support's very much appreciated. Until next time, onward and upward.
You've been listening to the Logistics of Logistics podcast, where we engage in conversation with experts in the logistics field. For more details, visit thelogisticsoflogistics.com or follow Joe Lynch on LinkedIn.